Right now, on your Instagram feed, there's a guy leaning against a yellow Lamborghini he rented for $300 an hour, wrist angled so you catch the Rolex. Standing in the marble lobby of a hotel he'll never check into. Caption says, "Blessed." You've double-tapped that photo. You might have screenshot it. You've definitely seen it enough times that you stopped noticing how fake it looks. This isn't new. Ancient humans have been faking status for thousands of years. Before money, before cities, before farming. And the methods are so similar to what we do today, it will make you uncomfortable. But first, you need to understand why faking wealth was even possible in a world where nobody was actually rich. Here's what we get wrong about prehistoric humans. We imagine 30 people in an open savanna, sharing a kill, splitting the work evenly. No bosses, no hierarchy. That's the story we tell ourselves. But the archaeological record tells a different one. In 1964, a team of Russian archaeologists excavating a site called Sungir, about 120 miles northeast of Moscow, found a burial that changed how we think about prehistoric societies. The site was roughly 34,000 years old, and in it they found a man, somewhere between 35 and 45 years old when he died, buried under more than 3,000 beads made from mammoth ivory. Each bead had been individually carved, polished, and drilled by hand. Researchers later estimated it would have taken around 10,000 hours of labor to produce all of them. That's roughly 5 years of full-time work, just for the beads on one body. But here's what makes Sungir really strange. 5 years later, in 1969, a second burial was uncovered nearby. 2 children, a boy of about 12 and a girl of about 10, laid head to head. They were covered in more than 10,000 ivory beads, over 3 times as many as the adult. They had mammoth ivory spears longer than their own bodies, ivory discs, 300 pierced fox teeth, carved antlers. One of the most lavishly decorated graves ever found from the Upper Paleolithic, and it belonged to kids who hadn't lived long enough to earn any of it. They didn't hunt those mammoths. They didn't carve those beads. They inherited status, which means 34,000 years ago, before writing, before agriculture, before bronze or iron or any metal at all, humans had already invented the concept of being born rich. And the moment being rich became a thing, faking it became a thing too. The first way ancient humans faked wealth was the most obvious one. They wore things they shouldn't have been able to get. In most prehistoric societies, certain materials carried meaning far beyond decoration. Amber, for instance. Amber is fossilized tree resin, sometimes 40 million years old, naturally translucent, golden, warm to the touch. It doesn't occur everywhere. In prehistoric Europe, most of it came from the Baltic coast, over 1,500 miles north of the Mediterranean, which meant if you were wearing amber in southern Spain, that single bead had crossed mountain ranges, rivers, and dozens of tribal territories to reach your neck. Wearing amber didn't just mean you looked good. It meant you were connected to trade networks that spanned an entire continent. It was proof that you mattered. So naturally, people faked it. In 2019, archaeologist Carlos Odriozola and his team at the University of Seville published a study in the journal PLOS ONE. They had analyzed beads from 2 burial sites in Spain, La Molina near Seville and Cova del Gigant near Barcelona. The beads looked exactly like amber, golden, polished, beautiful. But when they put them under infrared spectroscopy and electron microscopes, they weren't amber at all. Someone had taken seeds and mollusk shells, carved them into bead shapes, and then coated them in layer after layer of pine resin, sometimes 4 or 5 coats, until they looked identical to the real thing. 5,000 years old, and these were counterfeits. The first known fakes in European prehistory. And the detail that makes this genuinely unsettling is where they were found. In graves. Not just any graves either. At La Molina, 10 people were buried alongside ivory carvings, pottery vessels, and bone tools. And at Cova del Gigant, 4 fake beads were found sitting right next to 2 genuine amber beads, nearly identical in size and shape. Same grave, same neck, half real, half counterfeit. Odriozola pointed out that if his team of trained archaeologists with infrared spectrometers almost couldn't tell the difference, there's no way the people in the community could have. Whoever made those beads was running a con, and whoever wore them was either in on it or got cheated. 5,000 years before the first designer handbag, someone was already selling fakes to people who wanted to look richer than they were. But the faking went deeper than jewelry, way deeper. Some ancient humans didn't just wear fake wealth, they reshaped their own bodies to signal status. Across dozens of cultures on every inhabited continent, people practiced something called artificial cranial modification. Starting when a child was 4 or 5 days old, parents would strap flat boards to the infant's forehead or wrap cloth tightly around the skull and leave it there for about 6 months. The soft bones would gradually reshape into a high, tapered cone. By adulthood, their head would be visibly, permanently different from everyone else's. At a site called Haotao Muga in northeastern China, archaeologists found 11 out of 25 skeletons with clear signs of it, some dating back 12,000 years. And in many of these societies, the shape of your skull told people exactly where you stood. Among the Maya, during the Classic period from about 250 to 900 AD, only nobility underwent certain types of cranial deformation. If your head resembled the shape of the maize god, everyone knew you were elite. You didn't need to say a word. Your skull said it for you. Anthropologist Matthew Velasco, studying similar practices in Peru, found that people with modified skulls were consistently buried with richer grave goods, had access to better resources, and were entitled to land that unmodified people weren't. Your head shape didn't just signal status, it granted access to it. Now think about what that means for anyone trying to fake their way up. You couldn't just buy a modified skull. It had to be done in infancy, which means if you were born into a family that practiced it, you had a permanent, unforgeable marker of status built into your skeleton. And if you weren't, no amount of beads or amber or anything else could give you what they had. It was the one status symbol that couldn't be counterfeited, which is probably why it existed, because everything else could be. This is where the story gets interesting. In 1975, an Israeli biologist named Amotz Zahavi published a theory that explains why all of this follows the exact same logic. He called it the handicap principle. For a signal of quality to be believable, it has to be expensive. Not just a little expensive, ruinously, wastefully, almost irrationally expensive. Because if it were cheap, everyone would do it, and the signal would become meaningless. A peacock's tail is the classic example. The tail can stretch 5 feet long, uses up to 3% of the bird's total energy just to maintain, and makes it measurably slower when a fox is chasing it. It's objectively bad for survival, but that's exactly what makes it an honest signal. Only a genuinely healthy peacock can afford to drag 5 feet of iridescent feathers through a forest and still survive. The cost is the point. And those 10,000 hours of bead making at